Can every ancient artifact be explained? Not even close. Some discoveries challenge everything we think we know, and not even the best archaeologists or scientists have the answers. Their tools and theories have limits, and some mysteries lie far beyond them. In this video, we'll explore ancient enigmas so strange, so inexplicable, that they remain unsolved to this day, and might stay that way forever. If you love archaeological discoveries and mysterious finds, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Refugeus TV. Let's go. If we say the words decorated eggs, your first thought will likely be Easter. However, the practice of decorating eggs for special occasions is much older than any Easter tradition. This custom dates back at least 3,000 years before the Christian era. Ornate ostrich eggs have been found in various parts of the ancient world, including prestigious sites like the Tomb of Isis in Voltzi, Italy. These eggs frequently appear in collections belonging to Bronze Age and Iron Age rulers and elites, suggesting they were objects of great value, perhaps even symbols of status or collector's items, similar to Fabergé eggs in modern times. More recent studies show that these eggs came from ostriches originating in the Mediterranean region, with some specimens from North Africa and others from the Eastern Mediterranean. Most strikingly, eggs produced at one end of this vast area have been found at the other, indicating the existence of a sophisticated commercial network far more extensive than previously thought. To this day, there are no historical records of such an extensive trade route 5,000 years ago in this region. Therefore, these discoveries may force archaeologists to radically rethink what we know about the beginnings of trade in the ancient world. We are on our way to England, more precisely to Derbyshire, where the mysterious Anchor Church caves have confused archaeologists for generations. It's clear that someone carved these rocks by hand to live there. But who did it? That was always the big question. Until, in July 2021, a surprising new theory emerged. According to this new idea, the caves may have been the secret hideout of an Anglo-Saxon king living in exile in the 9th century, and that changes everything. Until then, it was thought that the place was just an 18th century architectural folly, one of those eccentric constructions that the wealthy built just to show off their power. But if that older theory is wrong, then we are talking about the oldest complete interior of a house in all of England. And the most incredible thing, it still has the floor, the ceiling, the windows, and even internal doors. Some archaeologists have compared the construction style to the Anglo-Saxon crypt nearby in Repton. And what about the king? It would be Eardwulf of Northumbria, who was deposed in the year 806. They say he lived in exile until he died in 830 and was buried in Bredon-on-the-Hill, which is just 8 kilometers away. The dates match. The places coincide. Could we have just discovered the secret hideout of a forgotten king? No one knows for certain what caused the downfall of the powerful Mayan Empire in Central America. We know it collapsed in the 8th century. But why remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries? There has been talk of prolonged drought, environmental collapse, overpopulation, tribal wars. But what if the true reason was a brutal civil war? This is what some archaeologists are beginning to suspect, because of a series of sinister finds called trophy skulls. In recent years, dozens of them have been discovered in regions that once belonged to the Mayans: Mexico, Belize, and Honduras. They all have something in common. They date from the 8th century and belong to people who died shortly before the abandonment of the great Mayan cities. One of them, in particular, stands out. It was found in southern Belize at a site called Pacalna. The skull is decorated with images of fire and wild animals, symbols clearly associated with the military of the northern Mayan territory. If northern armies reached so far south, it could mean that local leaders lost control, and the military intervened. Other skulls analyzed in the laboratory show the same trend. All were from men from the north. The question now is inevitable. Did the Mayan civilization literally fight to the death? It may seem unlikely, but the evidence is accumulating, and the story may be much bloodier than we imagined. For a long time, conventional archaeologists said that Neanderthals became extinct simply because they were less intelligent than Homo sapiens. But does that idea still make sense? New discoveries suggest that Neanderthals were far more advanced than we imagined. In the Italian caves studied by Paola Villa and her team, clear evidence was found that they mastered a technology that would only much later be attributed to modern humans: the use of adhesives for tools. We are talking about a kind of resin-based glue, created from pine trees and, in some cases, mixed with beeswax. This glue was used in a process called hafting, that is, joining a stone, bone, or wood blade to a handle. This allowed them to transform basic tools into sharp spears, leather scrapers, and more efficient cutting instruments. What's more, these Neanderthals lived about 55,000 years ago and traveled long distances just to get the right resin. This requires planning, memory, knowledge of materials, and intelligence. For a long time, we thought that only Homo sapiens were capable of this type of technological thinking. But these discoveries show the opposite. Have we underestimated Neanderthals out of pure historical prejudice? Everything indicates yes. Humans have been drawn to psychoactive substances since ancient times, but the reasons behind this fascination have changed greatly over time. To better understand, let's literally peek inside the backpack of a millennia-old shaman. In 2019, archaeologists found an extraordinary pouch hidden in a remote rock shelter in the Andes mountain range in Bolivia. It had been there for over 1,000 years, perfectly preserved by the dry mountain climate. The pouch is made of leather, and what it contained left scientists speechless. All the basic ingredients to prepare ayahuasca, an entheogenic drink known to cause intense hallucinations. For shamans, these visions were not mere delusions. They revealed messages, cures, even the future. But that wasn't all. Inside the pouch, there were also spatulas made of llama bone, nasal sniffing tablets, and even a small bag made of sewn fox snouts, objects that probably had sacred meaning. The rituals were solitary, and shamans sought these isolated rock shelters to achieve altered states away from the outside world. But there is a question that still intrigues archaeologists today. Why was this sacred backpack left behind? One of the darkest, though possible, hypotheses is that the shaman suffered a fatal fall during one of his visions, under the influence of ayahuasca, and never returned. We have known about the mysterious plain of jars in Laos for quite some time. Scattered across the Xianghuang Plateau in the country's highlands, these immense stone-carved jars can be between 1 and 3 meters tall and weigh over 10 tons each. They are estimated to be about 2,000 years old, but their true purpose is still an enigma. However, a relatively recent discovery may shed new light on the mystery. In May 2019, a team of Australian archaeologists found 137 more jars distributed across 15 new sites, and some of them may be more than 2,500 years old. Louise Chouan, a member of the team, believes that the jars were used in funerary rituals. The theory suggests that human bodies were placed inside the jars and left to decompose, so that later the bones could be removed and buried. Stone carvings and personal objects found next to the jars, such as jewelry and beads, seem to confirm this hypothesis. Did you think they were just giant ceremonial urns? What if, in reality, we are looking at a huge prehistoric open-air cemetery? Japan's Kofun tombs have fascinated archaeologists for decades, and the more we investigate, the more enigmas seem to arise. In January 2022, an intriguing discovery was made thanks to satellite images. All the tombs are perfectly aligned with the sunrise. These keyhole-shaped structures are scattered throughout the country, and each one points in the exact same direction. This cannot be a coincidence. There is undoubtedly a profound meaning behind this alignment. The problem is that we may never discover what it is. Japanese traditions claim that the Kofun are linked to Japan's first mythological emperors, and therefore access to them is highly restricted. Archaeologists cannot enter the tombs, and excavations are completely forbidden. Because of these restrictions, the solar alignment was only revealed now, with the help of satellite technology. Most of these burial mounds were built between the 3rd and 7th centuries, and the largest of all, the Daisen Kofun, is considered a UNESCO World Heritage Site, supposedly dedicated to Emperor Nintoku. And for now, that's all we can state with some certainty. The rest remains buried, both in the ground and in the silence of tradition. There are so many ancient artifacts buried in Egypt that we may never discover them all. Despite hundreds of archaeological sites having been excavated over the years, a new mystery always emerges from the sands. A notable example arose in July 2018, when a huge black sarcophagus was discovered at a construction site in Alexandria. The piece, dating back about 2,300 years, belongs to the Ptolemaic period and was found 5 meters deep by workers from the Supreme Council of Antiquities while excavating to build new offices in Sidi Gabr. The sarcophagus, made of black granite, was still completely sealed. A very worn bust was found next to it, possibly a clue as to who was buried inside, but time and erosion left the sculpture virtually unrecognizable. Only people of great wealth and status at that time would have been buried in something so heavy and sophisticated. Therefore, when the 15-ton lid is finally removed, some believe we may be standing before the remains of someone extremely important, perhaps even Alexander the Great. But don't rush to place bets. The full excavation could take years. Speaking of surprising ancient burial sites, an oil drilling project in Iran accidentally led to the discovery of an ancestral cemetery in July 2022. The discovery occurred in Avaz, the capital of Khuzestan province, and revealed something unusual. The dead were not buried in a traditional way, but rather inside structures resembling giant urns. Scientific analyses indicate that these tombs are about 2,000 years old. Interestingly, all are aligned towards a nearby river, which led experts to believe that the burials followed the precepts of Mithraism, an ancient religion that preceded Zoroastrianism in Iran. Mithra was worshipped as the god of the sun, justice, contracts, and war. Although it was common at that time to bury babies or young children in urns, this does not seem to apply in this case, where most of the buried individuals were adults. Iranian archaeologists would like more time to explore the site, but the oil project cannot be delayed for long. There may be much more to discover there, but they will have to race against time. Next, we move to Saudi Arabia, where in January 2022, archaeologists revealed the surprising discovery of a network of over 4,000-year-old highways, a mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew about mobility and social organization in the ancient world. Experts now believe that in northwestern Arabia, the populations of that era created extensive funerary avenues, lined with thousands of burial monuments that connected pastures and oases in a highly sophisticated system. This contradicts the traditional view that ancient communities in the region were isolated and poorly organized, suggesting instead an impressive level of social, religious, and economic connection over 4 millennia ago. As part of the same archaeological project, it was also discovered that the enigmatic mastadals, rectangular stone structures, are much older than previously thought, dating back over 7,000 years. The pendant-shaped tombs found in the Khaybar oasis appear to be about 5,000 years old. Little by little, the deep history of the Bronze Age in the Arabian Peninsula begins to emerge from the sands, and everything indicates that we are still only at the beginning. Our next recent discovery may be the most important archaeological find of the decade. An entire underground city was found in Turkey in April 2022, and archaeologists believe it may be the largest of its kind in the world. Excavating this lost city will be a slow and challenging process, as only about 3% of it has been revealed so far, with new tunnels, rooms, passages, and artifacts being discovered almost daily. Interestingly, this city has gone unnoticed until now, even though it is right in the middle of Mardin and Matiate, an area already famous among archaeologists and recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The city has been provisionally named Matiate, which means City of Caves. Experts believe it was built about 1,900 years ago, possibly as an underground refuge. In the 2nd century, Christianity was not yet an officially accepted religion, so many of its followers needed to hide to escape persecution from the Roman Empire. It is possible that at the height of its occupation, up to 70,000 people lived there, in the shadows, protected by the darkness of Matiate. The same ancient shipwreck that gave us the enigmatic Antikythera mechanism revealed another surprising treasure in June 2022, when marine archaeologists located what they believed to be the long-lost head of a 2,000-year-old marble statue of the Roman god Hercules. The shipwreck, located off the coast of Greece, was originally discovered by sponge divers in 1900 and has been the subject of continuous archaeological investigations ever since. It is estimated that the ship sank around 60 BC. Interestingly, the marble head was ignored for a long time, as it was so damaged and covered in concretions that it was mistaken for a shapeless rock. It was only possible to identify it after divers also found the statue's pedestal, still with the lower parts of the legs intact. But this was not the only recent revelation at the site. 2 human teeth embedded in marine sediments were also found, proving that at least one person died there, unable to escape the ship before it sank. Historians believe that the vessel, about 40 meters long, had departed from somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean bound for Rome and ended up sinking during a storm. With these new discoveries, archaeologists hope to unravel even more secrets hidden beneath the waters of Antikythera. We tend to believe that the science of developing prosthetic limbs is a relatively recent one, but history shows us that isn't correct. Here we see a prosthetic wooden toe affixed to the foot of an Egyptian mummy. The individual wearing the toe passed away 3,000 years ago. Experts have studied the toe extensively and reached the conclusion that it was amended and refitted several times, presumably in an attempt to make it more comfortable for its female owner. The discovery was made in the tomb of a priest's daughter, which means you didn't have to be male or socially significant in your own right to obtain such advanced medical treatment. The artisan who made this clearly knew a thing or two about human anatomy and physiology. We can tell that not only from the finely crafted toe, but also the belt strap that holds it to the foot. This artifact was made during the Iron Age and was found in a tomb on a graveyard sitting on the hill of Sikalkurna, not far from Luxor and the Valley of the Kings. It's the oldest prosthetic limb ever found, and raises questions about how much more advanced ancient doctors were than we generally give them credit for. In 1891, American geologist Dr. Barber was summoned to investigate a series of strange spiral-shaped rock structures in Nebraska, USA. He spent years studying them but couldn't fully explain them, and we're still struggling to do so today. The bizarre shapes are full of sand, and the white material that makes up their wall is unidentified. To give things a sinister twist, Barber found dead rodents at the bottom of almost every single one of them. He gave them the name Demonolics, based on a nickname that had already been given to them by local ranchers, Devil's Corkscrews. The current working theory is that these shapes were made by creatures known as palichisters, a species that became extinct 20 million years ago, but is thought to have been similar to the modern-day beaver. The creature might have dug out the spirals as a type of burrow, filled them with sand to stay warm, and took rodents in there with them to eat. That sounds pretty far-fetched, but it's the best idea we have at the moment. Our next mystery revolves around the fact that one of 2 hard-to-process facts must be true. Either the legendary Terracotta Army of ancient China is an elaborate fake, or the ancient Chinese knew about electrolytic chromium plating long before the rest of the world did. The official story of the Terracotta Army is that the clay soldiers are 2,200 years old and were buried to protect Emperor Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor in the afterlife. Western scientists and historians weren't allowed to study any of the clay soldiers in person until 2007, when a team of German experts was allowed access. The analysis of the Germans was that the statues were no more than a few decades old at most. The weapons that the soldiers hold in their hands are covered with chromium plating, of a kind that wasn't invented in Europe until the 1920s. Either someone in China knew how to go about the process over 2,000 years before anyone else in the world did, or the 8,000 clay soldiers that make up the army are nothing more than Chinese propaganda. We wouldn't like to say which one is more likely to be the reality. There's an episode of the popular BBC science fiction show Doctor Who entitled Vampires of Venice, but few people who've seen that story will have realized that the story might have been rooted in truth. It appears the people who lived in Venice during the 16th century were very afraid of vampires, so much so that they drove stakes through the skulls of anyone they suspected of being one. This gruesome discovery was made on the Venetian island of Lazaretto Nuovo in March 2009. As we can clearly see, a stake-shaped rock has been driven through the open mouth of the poor victim. Matteo Barini of the University of Florence says that this strange practice would have been seen as a way of ensuring that the deceased wouldn't come back from the dead, chew through their shroud, and resume their attacks on the living. It's believed that vampires, despite not existing, took the blame for the 1576 Venetian plague, which left 50,000 people dead in the city that year. A lack of knowledge about epidemiology and decomposition led to people looking for supernatural explanations for the spread of the plague and the grotesque appearance of the corpses in the city's mass graves, and vampires were apparently the most obvious answer. Mummification was the ancient Egyptian way of laying the deceased to eternal rest peacefully and with dignity. So why is it that a few mummies appear to have gone to the grave screaming? The world's best-known screaming mummy is Meritumen, a princess who appears to have spent the past few thousand years crying out in terror long after her death, her mouth wide open and her head tilted back. A CT scan of her remains has suggested she passed away because of a heart attack. That might explain why she appears to be in pain, but embalmers would normally correct this issue when going about the mummification process. Pentawir, the son of Ramses III, is also a notable screaming mummy. Pentawir died of hanging rather than cardiac arrest, so the heart attack theory appears to be out of the window. One possible explanation is that either Meritumen wasn't found until several hours after she passed, by which time rigor mortis had set in and her jaw had locked. Another possibility is that the bandages around her jaw weren't wrapped tightly enough, and so it fell open after she was interred. Neither explanation is entirely satisfactory though, and so the mystery continues. You might not think there's anything exciting about our next archaeological mystery when you first look at it. To all intents and purposes, it looks like a rusty old bolt, possibly a discarded piece of machinery. Here's the twist. This bolt is 300 million years old. How is that even remotely possible? The bolt was found in the summer of 1998 at a site in Russia by researchers hunting for meteorite fragments near Moscow. It's hard to disagree with the logics of their findings in this case. The rock is 300 million years old, and the bolt is so deeply embedded in the rock that the stone has grown around it. The only conclusion that can be reached is that the bolt is also 300 million years old. That would mean it existed not only before human life on our planet, but before the time of the dinosaurs. Amazingly, this find isn't unique. Examples of screws, bolts, gears, and cogs have been found embedded in equally ancient rocks all over the world. The official scientific explanation is that the shapes are actually crinoid fossils. But surely that can't be possible in every single case. There are two schools of thought about the true nature of the Koso artifact. One is that it's nothing more than an amusing geological curiosity that was created a little more than a century ago. The other is that it's evidence of complex tools being used on Earth 500,000 years ago, or perhaps even proof of time travel. We know it's probably easier to believe the first suggestion than the second, but bear with us. There's no doubt about what's at the core of the artifact. It's a spark plug manufactured by a company called Champion at some point during the 1920s. What makes it so baffling is that the iron oxide shell that's formed around it is 500,000 years old, and that age has been proven by laboratory testing. The artifact was found in 1961 in California by researchers out on the hunt for geodes. They didn't find any geodes that day, but this little mystery is arguably more significant than any geode they could ever find. It's physically impossible for the spark plug to have been shoved into the center of the rock after it formed. So how did it get there? Scientists have no idea. In fact, we suspect that they'd rather pretend it didn't exist at all. Grobleman is one of the most visited and popular attractions in the Mosaic Museum in Denmark, and also one of the most grotesque. This 2,300-year-old corpse still has its own skin, hair, and fingernails. That can be chalked up to the fact that he spent almost all of that time buried in a peat bog, which has preserved him almost perfectly. The people who found him by accident while digging peat in 1952 didn't appreciate that near miracle, though. In fact, they took one look at him and ran away in fear. While there are several sets of human remains that have been pulled out of Denmark's numerous peat bogs over the years, Grobleman is by far the most famous and the most exceptionally well preserved. In fact, it appears the bog treated him better than his peers did. Physical evidence suggests that he's a human sacrifice victim. His shockingly red hair is believed to be a product of his many years in the bog. It's more likely that he was blonde than red-haired when he was first thrown into it. We're returning to China now, where archaeologists found themselves puzzling over the so-called monster art on the wall of this perfectly preserved 1,400-year-old tomb in 2017. Things depicted on the murals include a naked humanoid, a horse with wings, and a strange monster that appears to be made of blue fire. The tomb is nothing like any other burial place of its era ever found, so there's no reference guide to refer to. The paintings and carvings elsewhere in the tomb are of villagers riding horses or working within their communities, so it's just this one wall that seems so out of place. The most educated experts from the Shaanxi Provincial Institute of Archaeology were summoned to inspect the wall art, but they were left just as confused as everybody else. If we could decipher the images correctly, they might tell us who was buried in the tomb, but as we can't, we might never know. The images aren't necessarily a reference to the tomb's occupant, though. They could just as easily be a reference to an ancient Chinese mystical concept that we're unable to comprehend. Considering the fact that they ruled the land that's now known as Scotland for more than 1,200 years, it's alarming how little we know about the Picts. We don't even know how they referred to themselves. We get the term Picts from the ancient writings of the Romans, and it's thought to be a reference to the face paint they wore. The Picts had no written language and left behind very little in the way of buildings or monuments. So every time a trace of their civilization is found, it's always big news in the archaeological world. Here's one. It's a handprint left on a stone anvil by a Pictish metalsmith on the island of Rose roughly 1,500 years ago. The person who left this behind probably worked with copper, and may even have lived in this cramped building surrounded by 2 anvils and a hearth. Imprints of the smith's knees and hands have also been found at the site. The smith's room is underground and would have been pitch black were it not for the hearth and the red-hot metal he worked with. But the darkness might have been a deliberate choice to help him see and gauge the temperature of metal better. You might have heard of the town of Roswell in New Mexico, USA, from the alleged UFO crash landing that happened there several decades ago. That's not the only strange thing to have happened in Roswell. There's also the matter of this strange stone, which a local resident found in September 2004. Someone has gone to the trouble of creating a very smooth, very elaborate pattern on the stone, and they've somehow managed to do it without leaving a single trace of whatever machinery or tool they used to make it, even under a microscope and subjected to multiple magnifications. There are no cuts or abrasions at the edge of the markings at all. It's as if they appeared on the stone naturally, which is obviously not the case. To add a further layer of intrigue, the stone is magnetic. Place a magnet next to one of the crescent moon shapes engraved on the surface, and it will spin in a clockwise direction. Place that same magnet next to the other crescent moon, and it spins the other way. Add that to the fact that the design on the surface is identical to one that turned up as a so-called crop circle in a field in England in 1996, and you're looking at a mystery for the ages. The history of ancient humans sailing and seafaring isn't anything like as well understood as we'd like it to be. We don't really know who the first people to make boats are or how far they might have sailed. We do, however, know that the Vikings made it as far as North America, and so almost anything is possible. Does that mean that Pirirace made it to Antarctica? Perhaps so. The Pirirace map, named after the Turkish admiral who either commissioned or drew it in 1513, contains far more detail than a person of that era should have known about. That includes the coastline of Antarctica, a continent that wasn't officially discovered for another 300 years. The representation of the coastline is too accurate for his drawing to be guesswork, so he must have seen it, even if he did so from afar. Oddly, he's drawn it without ice, so either Antarctica looked very different back then, or he was working from another reference map and mistranslated some details. Whatever the reason, it appears that the Turkish Navy had at least some knowledge of Antarctica long before other nations began laying claims to discovering it during the 19th century, and we have no idea how that could be possible using the wooden ships of the time. While we're on the topic of strange things turning up in ancient works of art, cast your eyes over these ancient Sumerian face reliefs. At first glance, they appear to be beautiful, but otherwise normal depictions of human beings working and hunting. But pay closer attention to their arms and their wrists. It looks for all the world like these ancient people are wearing modern-looking wristwatches. These aren't the only out-of-place objects that are said to be visible in ancient Sumerian works of art. Some people claim that there are spaceships in a few of the bas reliefs, but the alleged spaceships don't look anything like as clear as these wristwatches do. You can even make out the markings on the faces. We know that the Sumerians had an advanced understanding of time 2,700 years ago. They had a calendar that was specific to their civilization, which, according to their creation myth, was given to them by the Anunnaki, who created all human life. We also know that they were considerably more advanced than many of their neighboring civilizations in terms of astronomy and medicine. Did their knowledge expand to clockwork and the manufacture of timepieces? Probably not. But we can't think what else these objects might be. Let's head to North America and check out a discovery that was made in Nevada on December 23, 2021 and was first reported on Christmas Day. Researchers there confirmed the discovery of a 55-foot-long creature that's been described as a Triassic-era sea monster. It lived around 247 million years ago. Scientists have given the newly discovered creature the catchy name Cymbospondylus jungorum and describe it as a marine reptile with an enormous jaw. It's part of the ichthyosaur family. Back when the creature was alive, its natural habitat would have been a mega-ocean that once existed off the west coast of North America called the Panthalassic Ocean. The species appears to have survived a period known as the Great Dying, which occurred around 5 million years earlier and killed more than 90% of the animals that existed in the world at the time towards the end of the Permian period. The precise cause of this mass extinction event remains unknown. It's to be hoped that studying the remains of this sea monster might provide us with a few answers, although it's still early days in terms of doing the necessary work. We don't mean to alarm anyone, but scientists don't really understand the phases of the sun. That's a little alarming to hear when the well-being of our entire planet depends on our native star, but it's true. We know that because in January 2022, scientists completed a lengthy study of ice cores found in Antarctica and Greenland. Locked within the ice is evidence of a colossal solar storm that happened around 9,200 years ago. That's a problem for scientists because, according to their data modeling, the sun was going through a quiet phase 9,200 years ago and shouldn't have been throwing out solar storms anything like this big. The evidence of the storm is there in the levels of beryllium-10 and chlorine-36 preserved in both the ice and the sediment within it. If a storm of this size happened today, it would cause an almost total global communications blackout and pose a clear and present danger to air traffic. Since we now know that we can't trust the data modeling of our best scientists, we have no way of knowing if or when one might be coming. Nature provides at times and takes away at others. If you're lucky, nature may someday return what it has taken. It happened to this temple in India's Odisha region. It was constructed in honor of Lord Gopinath, one of Vishnu's many avatars in the 15th century. For 400 years all was well with the temple, but in the 19th century, the Mahanadi River abruptly shifted course and drowned the area, engulfing not just the temple, but also an entire adjacent town. The temple's statues were preserved and transported to the nearby Gopinath Temple, but the structure itself was doomed. The water eventually receded, and the temple emerged in June 2020. Although it appears terribly damaged in these photos, where it is obviously still mostly underwater, local officials have expressed optimism that the excess water can be artificially drained away and the shrine repaired. The Indian National Trust for Art aspires to have the temple dismantled, relocated, and reassembled if restoration is not possible. Given the temple's current state, that may be a little too much to hope for, but then again, who knows what could be possible? For a long time, archaeologists wondered whether the existence of the so-called Dragon City of the Xiongnu Empire was a myth. In July 2020, they discovered the truth. In the middle of Mongolia, sitting on the banks of the Orkhon River, the long-lost city was finally found. The mysterious Xiongnu Empire was formed from the confederation of tribes that lived on the Eastern European steppe more than 2,300 years ago and lasted for around 4 centuries. They coexisted with the Chinese dynasties to the east, but alternately traded and fought with them many times over the years. Dragon City was said to be the most outstandingly beautiful city of its era, hidden in Mongolia's Qanghai Mountains. We'll never know if that was true at the time, but there isn't much left of it today. All archaeologists have been able to identify is the city's old double wall, a reservoir, and an unknown structure inscribed with the words Son of Heaven written in kanji. Experts aren't sure what to make of it all, and so it seems that the Dragon City will forever keep some of its secrets. Until June 2020, it was thought that the northern line of the Great Wall of China, also known as Genghis Khan's Wall, was built between the 11th and 13th centuries as a line of defense against the marauding Mongol hordes of Khan and his men. In June 2020, that supposition was proven to be untrue. A systematic survey of this section of the wall has revealed that it may have been useful in preventing nomadic raids, but it was also a means of monitoring and controlling local nomadic populations, and more specifically, their enormous herds of animals. This was a key objective of the Khitan Liao Empire, which existed in the region at the time and sought to expand its power by controlling the nomads who lived in the northern territory. A series of 72 structures built into the walls have been interpreted as a means of monitoring the population from low vantage points, rather than using high vantage points to keep a lookout for an approaching army. Rather than protecting the region from Genghis Khan, Chinggis Khan, or anybody else, the wall appears to have been a means of consolidating regional power. We're off to Mexico now, where there's been a lot of excitement among archaeologists about this large, intricately carved stone in Colima State. It's recently been registered for protection by the National Institute of Anthropology and History on the grounds that it's thought to be an ancient stone map. The volcanic rock was thrown from the nearby Fuego de Colima volcano some 2,000 years ago, but was likely carved around 2,100 years ago. The lines on its surface can be interpreted as waterways, with cavities that might represent small settlements or villages. Traces of these ancient villages have been found at the locations indicated by the map. The pre-Hispanic residents of Colima had no written language, so this may have been a pictorial way of passing on knowledge, or perhaps just a way of identifying and marking out their territory. The idea of the rock as a map has critics, with some experts suggesting that their colleagues simply see what they want to see when they look at the markings, but the Institute is convinced by its merits enough to designate it as a historical monument. The Archaeological Survey of India hailed a great discovery in July 2020 when it found a 9th century monolithic shivling sandstone in Vietnam's Cham Temple complex. It's likely that the monument would never have been found at all, were it not for a conservation project the team was there to partake in. The discovery is important not just because it's a beautiful and well-preserved shivling, but also because it reaffirms that there was significant cultural contact between Vietnam and India in ancient times. The temple complex is a World Heritage Site and was built by order of King Indravarman II when he was the ruler of the Khmer Empire. 6 other shivlings have also been found at the site, although none of the others is as impressive as this one. The same team has also found black touchstone pillars, red sandstone pillars, and broken idols of ancient gods and goddesses. Taken all together, they feel that this might point to the existence of a hitherto unknown temple hidden among all the others at the complex. Excavating the whole site is such a large-scale job that it's still going on now, over a year since this discovery. During an excavation in Pljevlja, Montenegro, archaeologists discovered a sculpture similar to the bust of Nefertiti, but with mysterious features like a blue crown and strange markings. After examinations, they revealed that inside the piece was an advanced technological structure with circuits and implants, suggesting it was not just a sculpture, but a type of artificial being called Blue Nefertari. Nearby documents spoke of a guardian of the knowledge of the stars, raising theories that Blue Nefertari could be a messenger from the future or from another civilization. The discovery drew worldwide attention and placed Montenegro at the center of an unprecedented archaeological mystery, suggesting that humanity's past may hide much more than we know. The Porbajin Complex in the Tuva region of Russia is one of the greatest archaeological mysteries in this enormous country. Its name translates from the Tuvinian language as clay house, which tells us what it's made out of but not what it was built for. This strange site, positioned on an island in the middle of Terracotta Lake, is a relic of the Uyghur culture and was most likely built during the 8th century. When it was first discovered by archaeologists, it was initially thought to be the ruins of an ancient fortress. But subsequent studies have revealed that the layout of the buildings and the rooms they contained is more consistent with the design of an ancient Chinese royal palace. Mysteriously, there's no evidence of human activity in or around the site other than the existence of the buildings themselves. That might suggest that it was built somewhere around 777 as a temple to the followers of the Manichaeism religion. Tengri Bogu Khan, a devotee of that faith, was the ruler of this area in that year, but was violently overthrown in an uprising led by opponents of the religion 2 years later. With Khan gone and the religion outlawed, any temple dedicated to it would have been deemed surplus to requirements. When kids are bored or looking for something to do, they turn to toys. Although the modern toy business is a huge multinational industry, the concept of producing toys dates back to the dawn of humanity. Here's a leather toy mouse unearthed inside the ruins of the ancient Roman fort of Vindolanda, near Hadrian's Wall in England, as an example of how old it is. It is considered to be roughly 1,900 years old by archaeologists. This old shred of leather is just 5 inches in length and an inch wide, yet it's so finely detailed that it even has fur markings all over it. Are we, however, leaping to conclusions by labeling it a child's toy? Maybe we are. The relic was discovered in the fort's commanding officer's quarters. This implies that the officer in charge of a Roman garrison either enjoyed playing with toy mice or had his family and children join him within a military compound. Some historians believe it was more likely a practical joke devised by idle soldiers to terrify their comrades than a toy. Would Roman troops truly be terrified of mice after all the bloody, visceral battles they'd seen, though? Finding an old Roman mosaic in Italy might not sound especially rare or implausible at first, but wait until you hear where this one was discovered. It's the beautiful floor of what would once have been an enormous Roman villa, and it was found beneath the mud and grass of a vineyard in Negrardi Valpolicella, slightly north of Verona. The frustrating thing about this discovery is that it could have been made a century ago. Archaeologists noted the presence of Roman artifacts in the vineyard in 1922, but decided there was no point doing any further digging and left the scene alone. If they'd gone another few feet into the earth, they'd have found the mosaic floor there and then. The vineyard is part of a commune, so any further excavations will have to be carried out with the permission of the commune's occupants, who would presumably have to be financially compensated for the temporary or permanent loss of their vineyard. That extra layer of complication might mean that the full villa is never excavated, and we never get an answer to the question of who thought planting a vineyard on a mosaic floor was ever a good idea in the first place. When you go somewhere on vacation or holiday, you might buy a trinket or a souvenir to take back home as evidence that you made the trip. It's a curious human habit, but it dates back to the days of the Roman Empire at the very least. We know that because of the discovery of a unique ancient Roman iron stylus on the banks of the former River Walbrook in London, England in July 2019. Upon the four sides of the stylus is etched a lengthy inscription that identifies it as a gift. The inscription, written in Latin, translates as, "I have come from the city of Londinium. I bring you a welcome gift with a sharp point so that you may remember me. I may ask, if fortune allows, that I might be able to give as generously as the day is long and my purse is empty. We suspect that some of the charm of the message has been lost in translation, but we understand its general meaning. The stylus was gifted by someone who wanted the recipient to remember them by it, but it's also acknowledged that the gift is cheap and the sender wishes they could have bought something more valuable. To put it in its most simple terms, it says, I went to London and all I got you was this pen." In May 2020, archaeologists in southern Australia visited the rock shelters of Waikiri on the banks of the Murray River for the first time. What they found inside them made them wish they'd given the rock shelter their attention long before now. There inside the shelters, they found Aboriginal rock art etched into the limestone, along with invaluable evidence of frontier life and, strangely, a swastika. There are 188 engravings at the site in total. Only one of them, a motif of a tree, can conclusively be said to be of pre-European Aboriginal design. The remainder were created by Aboriginals influenced or affected by European visitors, members of punitive expeditions, and local European settlers. The swastika appears to have been engraved in 1932, several years before the outbreak of the Second World War. According to the archaeologist responsible for the discovery, the presence of the European engravings represents the first known breach of Aboriginal cultural space by outsiders and therefore the first recorded act of trespass and desecration in Australia. We suppose that makes this an unpleasant discovery, but it's still important nonetheless.
Most of us know what a head lice comb looks like through bitter experience, whether that's as a child or with our children. Lice combs have looked the same throughout history. Here's one of the oldest ones archaeologists have ever found. One that bears an inscription which might be the oldest in the world. The comb and its inscription were found at a 4,000-year-old site in Israel that was once Lachish, a Canaanite city-state. It's made of ivory, and the words scratched into its surface are written in the oldest known alphabet. It says, "May this tusk root out the lice of the hair and the beard," which is, of course, precisely what a lice comb is intended to do. Deciphering and translating the letters on the artifact took Israeli archaeologists and experts an entire year, with the findings reported in November 2022. The Canaanite script is the oldest alphabet that exists in the historical record, and translating it is a slow and difficult task because our understanding of it is imperfect. Microscopic examination of the comb has revealed the presence of head lice in their nymph stage, so the comb was effective. Some archaeological discoveries have been made more than once. Take the Waka Pintata fresco in northern Peru, for example. It was first discovered more than a century ago, and photographs of it were taken. But those responsible for the initial discovery didn't do a great job of documenting precisely where they'd found it. As a result of their poor record keeping, the fresco was lost again, and wasn't rediscovered until late 2022. Fortunately, the fresco doesn't seem to have suffered in its century out of the public eye, and is still in excellent condition. According to the Swiss archaeologist Sam Gavami, it's more than 1,000 years old and has a composition unlike any other pre-Hispanic mural ever found in Peru. The Waka Pintata fresco is so named because it's part of the Waka Pintata Temple, which is thought to have been created by the Moche civilization that lived in this part of Peru between the 1st and 8th centuries. They're known to have worshipped the moon, but based on the images that make up the mural, it seems they may also have worshipped a bird-like deity. You never have to go too far to find someone who believes that Earth has been visited by aliens. For those who believe in such things, discoveries like this one are the reason why. It's a collection of Claus Dawn artifacts. If we take the story of their discovery at face value, they were found in a cave in Mexico in 2018 and are 7,000 years old. Many of the artifacts appear to depict classic gray-like aliens with long faces and round black eyes. Some of the sculptures said to have been found in the cave even appear to depict spaceships flying through the air. A video of the artifacts went viral after being uploaded to a YouTube channel called UFO Mania, which has raised the suspicions of skeptics. The first issue with the claim is that the precise location of the cave has never been given. The second problem is that all of the artifacts appear to be in near mint condition. We don't know who found them or who assessed them and determined them to be 7,000 years old. To put it another way, it's entirely possible that the objects are all fakes. Tattoos are very fashionable at the moment, but there's nothing new about them. Humans have been tattooing themselves and each other for thousands of years. Historians have wondered for a long time why so many ancient Egyptian women had tattoos, but a new theory emerged in November 2022. Experts now think that the tattoos were meant as a form of magical protection during pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum period. These tattoos were worn on the lower backs of women, similarly to what we saw in the so-called tramp stamp tattoo craze of the early 21st century. The conclusion has been reached after the study of 6 ancient Egyptian mummies who were buried 3,000 years ago in Deir el-Medina, all of whom were confirmed to have given birth during their lives. The best preserved of the tattoos features a depiction of the deity Bes, protector of women and children, and a bull that might have been intended to symbolize ritual purification. One of the other women also had a tattoo of a zigzag pattern representing a marsh. It's known that Egyptian women use the cooling waters of marshes to alleviate the pains associated with childbirth. The passing of a child is always a tragedy and has been such since the dawn of human civilization. There's evidence of that in this Stone Age child burial, which was discovered in Majunsu, Finland in November 2022. When this child was laid to rest around 8,000 years ago, they were buried wrapped in fur and plants on a bed made of bird feathers. Microscopic fragments of all of those materials were identified within the burial at the time of the discovery. Experts were able to locate the grave because of its intense red ochre shade. Red ochre was used in rock art and human burials all over the world in prehistoric times, and experts have never known why. Little remains of the grave's human occupant other than a few teeth, from which we can say that they were between 3 and 10 years old when they passed away. The feather fragments recovered from their grave, though, are the oldest ever found in Finland. The animal that the fur came from is yet to be identified, but it's most likely a dog or a wolf. Scandinavia is the right place to look if you're in search of Viking treasure, and so it proved to be the case again when a Viking hack silver hoard was found in Stordal, Norway in December 2021. There are 46 individual artifacts in the hoard, all of which are silver, but only 2 of which are entirely intact. The rest of them have been deliberately broken into pieces. Before that happened, they were coins, necklaces, chains, wires, and bracelets. The hoard is unusual because most Viking hack silver finds are made up of various fragments of different objects. In this case, all the pieces of each object are still present in the hoard. The Vikings cut silver up like this because they used the pieces as a form of currency, with the value of each piece based on its weight. Norway was a late adopter of coin-based currency, with no coins minted in the country until the 9th century. These silver pieces were hacked early in that century and would have replaced the barter-based economy that existed before it. The total value of the hoard would have been worth about half the price of a cow at that time. It was in the heart of the dense forests of Laos, a small country in Southeast Asia, that a group of local explorers made a discovery that still perplexes scientists and local residents to this day. On a mist-covered and silent morning, one of the expedition's guides stepped on something metallic, partially buried beneath the roots of an ancient tree. When they carefully dug it out, they revealed an object that seemed straight out of a science fiction story. A bronze disc with a strange face marked by large, gleaming eyes that appeared to watch those who looked at it, as if it were guarding secrets from another time, or perhaps another world. The artifact was named the Kalmpa Disc, after the small nearby village where it was found. According to the local villagers, there are legends passed down from generation to generation about the eyes that see everything and the mirror of the sky. Descriptions that perfectly match the mysterious disc. Most astonishing of all is that, despite appearing ancient, the object was in perfect condition, as if time itself had forgotten to touch it. Experts who examine the object notice something unusual. The figure's eyes are made of a material resembling glass or polished stone, but unlike anything known in the region. They reflect light in an extraordinary way, with a seemingly infinite depth. When one gets close to the face, strange distortions appear in the reflection, and some people claim to have seen images that weren't really there. Reports include visions of floating cities, unknown creatures, and even fleeting glimpses of faces that vanish immediately. The figure carved into the disc, referred to by some as the Guardian, bears features reminiscent of both tribal art and modern depictions of extraterrestrial beings. Its head is elongated, the eyes are oval and take up most of the face, and a triangular symbol is engraved at the top of its forehead. Around the edge of the disc are geometric inscriptions that have yet to be deciphered, though scholars believe they might represent a language or some kind of symbolic code. The origin of the Kalmpa Disc remains a mystery. There are many theories. Some claim it belonged to a lost civilization that made contact with beings from other planets. Others believe it is a ritual object from a people who understood phenomena we are only now beginning to grasp. There are even those who think the disc is a kind of ancient technological artifact, a window to other worlds, or perhaps a tool for interdimensional communication. Since its discovery, the Kalmpa Disc has been kept in a small room at the National Museum in Vientiane, the capital of Laos, where it attracts thousands of visitors each year. People travel from all over the world just to see it up close, and many leave with stories to tell. A Japanese visitor reported that after staring at the disc for a few minutes, he experienced a powerful sense of déjà vu and heard a soft voice speaking in an unknown language echoing in his mind. Others say their dreams completely changed after the visit, filled with glowing figures and places they had never seen before. Whether it's just an ancient artifact or something far beyond our understanding, the Kalmpa Disc continues to intrigue. And as long as there are no definitive answers, it remains a reminder that there is still much in the world, and perhaps beyond it, that we do not yet comprehend. You may have heard people ask who the first person to milk a cow was and what they thought they were doing. We'll never know who that person was or what their motivations were, but we're getting closer to finding out when and where it happened. In October 2022, scientists confidently announced that they'd identified the earliest use of milk in prehistoric Europe. They believe that farmers began using milk at a site called En-Chichime in Alsace, France, approximately 7,400 years ago. The age and location come from the identification of traces of dairy fat on the walls of pottery vessels recovered from the area. The farmers would have belonged to the linear Bon-Ceramic culture, and it appears that they may have used milk on an industrial scale. Traces of the liquid have been found in more than 4,300 vessels, not only at En-Chichime, but at 70 other known settlements belonging to the mysterious culture. The traces at the En-Chichime site remain the oldest though, suggesting that the discovery of the potential of milk happened here before the information was relayed to the culture's other sites. In 1440, a ship called the Skafto picked up cargo in Gdansk, Poland, and set off for Belgium. It never made it to its destination. We'll never know why it sank, but it went down close to the Lice archipelago. The wreck, or to be more accurate, its cargo, has recently been studied by experts from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. In doing so, the experts have discovered that there was quicklime on board. It wasn't previously known that this material was exported from Gotland during the 15th century. Other materials aboard the sunken vessel include tar, bricks, roof tiles, oak timber, and copper. In other words, it seems that the Skafto was transporting vast quantities of building materials from one place to another. Scientific analysis of the copper reveals that it was minted in what's now Slovakia, but that the bricks and timber almost certainly came from Poland. This might confirm medieval sources, which say that Slovakian mines shipped their produce to Gdansk via the rivers of the Carpathian Mountains, which was previously believed to be too hazardous and impractical to be true.
The yellow brick road isn't real. Or is it?
Here's a yellow brick road that exists not in Kansas or Oz, but deep below the sea on a ridge close to the Hawaiian Islands. This road, which looks artificial in nature, was found by a deep-sea exploration vessel called Nautilus as it explored the Liliuokalani Ridge in April 2022. The ridge is part of the Papahānaumoku Marine National Monument, which is one of the world's largest marine conservation areas and covers a larger area than every national park in the United States of America combined. The so-called road seen in this footage looks dry, but it's actually more than 10,000 feet below sea level. The yellow brick road is what the team behind the Nautilus project has nicknamed their discovery. But some fringe theorists speculate that it could be the road to Atlantis. A more rational mind might suggest that the surface of this old lake bed has been fractured by heating stress caused by volcanic activity, but that would just spoil the fun. The rectangular blocks that make up the road certainly look like bricks and are a reminder that nature can sometimes make very familiar patterns. Egyptian burials containing elite members of the ancient civilization are known to contain some of the most exquisite and enigmatic grave goods in the world. Archaeologists in Egypt are used to seeing exotic goods in the tombs they open. But in January 2023, a group of them confirmed the discovery of something they described as extraordinary and deeply strange in the Theban necropolis. They're referring to the finding of 9 crocodile heads. The ancient Egyptians often mummified and buried animals for a variety of reasons. But this is the first time that reptile remains have been found inside the tombs of humans. The skulls were deliberately placed within the burial chamber of an individual called Kati when they were laid to rest around 4,000 years ago. The young Nile crocodiles were presumably killed specifically for the burial. Kati was a chancellor and held high rank in the court of the pharaoh Mentuhotep II, so his burial would have been an elaborate ceremony. It's possible that crocodiles were significant to Kati for personal reasons, or he may have been a member of the cult of Sobek, which worshipped the crocodile-headed god. The magic sphere of Helios Apollo is the name given to a stunning marble sphere that was found on the hillside close to the Temple of Dionysus in Athens, Greece in 1866. It's hard for scientists to date stone artifacts, but we know the temple was constructed around 2,600 years ago. And it was at first thought reasonable to assume that the sphere comes from the same period. It was discovered by Professor Athanasios Theosopoulos, who believed that the symbols etched into its surface were arcane and had connections with magic and spellcasting, hence the artifact's name. A later study by Armand L. Delat concluded that the sphere is actually a talisman, which was buried close to a theater next to the temple by someone who was hoping for good luck in a theatrical contest. Delat estimated it to be a product of the 1st or 2nd century, rather than being as old as the temple. There's another plot twist though, as a more recent study by Nick Farrell concludes that the sphere was designed as a spirit house, designed to encase a spirit that could be called upon for assistance by its owner. We may never know which of these interpretations, if any of them, is correct. There are many ancient tombs to admire in Turkey. Göbekli Tepe gets most of the attention from tourists, but some of that attention ought to go to the Kapila Kaya rock tomb. Maybe the reason it's not as famous as Göbekli Tepe is that you have to climb a mountain to find it. The tomb is high on a mountaintop just north of Korom. The entrance is hard to find even if you know what you're looking for, but it's worth the search. This is a staggering feat of ancient construction and architecture, but the question of just how ancient it is unresolved. We don't know who built the Kapila Kaya tomb or why. Archaeologists think it was made about 2,200 years ago for a military leader called Ikesios, but that's only because the word Ikesios is crudely scratched into a wall inside the tomb. There's no proof that the inscription was made at the same time as the tomb, and even if it was, it's not like the name Ikesios was reserved for just one person. Whoever this person was, their people fought enough of them to carve a large cube-shaped tomb directly into the side of a mountain for them.
Next, we move to Saudi Arabia, where in January 2022, archaeologists revealed the surprising discovery of a network of over 4,000-year-old highways, a mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew about mobility and social organization in the ancient world. Experts now believe that in northwestern Arabia, the populations of that era created extensive funerary avenues, lined with thousands of burial monuments, that connected pastures and oases in a highly sophisticated system. This contradicts the traditional view that ancient communities in the region were isolated and poorly organized, suggesting instead an impressive level of social, religious, and economic connection over 4 millennia ago. As part of the same archaeological project, it was also discovered that the enigmatic mastadals, rectangular stone structures, are much older than previously thought, dating back over 7,000 years. The pendant-shaped tombs found in the Khaybar oasis appear to be about 5,000 years old. Little by little, the deep history of the Bronze Age in the Arabian Peninsula begins to emerge from the sands, and everything indicates that we are still only at the beginning. Our next recent discovery may be the most important archaeological find of the decade. An entire underground city was found in Turkey in April 2022, and archaeologists believe it may be the largest of its kind in the world. Excavating this lost city will be a slow and challenging process, as only about 3% of it has been revealed so far, with new tunnels, rooms, passages, and artifacts being discovered almost daily. Interestingly, this city has gone unnoticed until now, even though it is right in the middle of Mardin and Matiate, an area already famous among archaeologists and recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The city has been provisionally named Matiate, which means City of Caves. Experts believe it was built about 1,900 years ago, possibly as an underground refuge. In the 2nd century, Christianity was not yet an officially accepted religion, so many of its followers needed to hide to escape persecution from the Roman Empire. It is possible that at the height of its occupation, up to 70,000 people lived there, in the shadows, protected by the darkness of Matiate. The same ancient shipwreck that gave us the enigmatic Antikythera mechanism revealed another surprising treasure in June 2022, when marine archaeologists located what they believe to be the long-lost head of a 2,000-year-old marble statue of the Roman god Hercules. The shipwreck, located off the coast of Greece, was originally discovered by sponge divers in 1900 and has been the subject of continuous archaeological investigations ever since. It is estimated that the ship sank around 60 BC. Interestingly, the marble head was ignored for a long time, as it was so damaged and covered in concretions that it was mistaken for a shapeless rock. It was only possible to identify it after divers also found the statue's pedestal, still with the lower parts of the legs intact. But this was not the only recent revelation at the site. 2 human teeth embedded in marine sediments were also found, proving that at least one person died there, unable to escape the ship before it sank. Historians believe that the vessel, about 40 meters long, had departed from somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean bound for Rome and ended up sinking during a storm. With these new discoveries, archaeologists hope to unravel even more secrets hidden beneath the waters of Antikythera. Is Lindholmhøje in Nørresundby, Denmark a stone circle? Well, it is in a way, but it's also much more than that. This field of jagged standing stones contains circles, but it also contains lines and other patterns. Rather than being an ancient calendar of the kind that many historians suspect most stone circles to be, Lindholmhøje is a huge cemetery that still holds the bodies of more than 700 Vikings. The first burials here actually took place in the early 4th century, long before the start of the Viking Age, but they became more frequent during the Viking era, before suddenly coming to an unexplained halt in the early 10th century. The hillside location of the cemetery offers an excellent view of nearby Aalborg, but the city didn't even exist when the last person was laid to rest here. It would have been nothing but open fields. The unusual patterns made by the rocks sometimes appear to be effigies of longboats with pointed stones at each end. There's also some evidence of large fires at the site, so the stone boats might have stood in for the real thing during traditional Viking funerals. There are plenty of beaches in the United States of America, but none like Papakolea Beach in Nalihu, Hawaii. That's because it's the only beach in the entire country to feature green sand. The color of the sand isn't the only thing that's interesting about it. It's also made of a semi-precious material. There are only a couple of beaches like this in the entire world, and their existence is down to a very precise and fortuitous blend of geology and chemistry. The green sand has been formed through repeated eruptions from Mauna Loa over thousands of years, creating an enormous cinder cone which in turn created a small bay. The eruptions brought minerals to the surface that would otherwise have remained deep underground. One of those minerals is olivine, a silicate mineral that forms the basis of the green sand. Most of the ash and glass from the eruptions have been washed out to sea as the cinder cone eroded over time, but the chunks of olivine are dense and resisted the tides. There hasn't been an eruption for 10,000 years, so the material has had plenty of time to settle, and the beach is here to stay. Our next discovery has been interpreted as a sign of a forthcoming disaster by the people who found it. It's an enormous fish called an ore king, and it was found by fishermen in Arica, Chile in July 2022. The creature is an especially large kind of oarfish. This particular example is more than 15 feet long. They live at depths of more than 1,000 feet, and so are seen by humans very rarely. Local superstitions, backed up a little by scientific evidence, say that ore kings come to the surface because of the movements of tectonic plates deep beneath the sea. So whenever an ore king is seen, an earthquake or a tsunami will soon follow. There hasn't yet been an earthquake or tsunami in Chile since the discovery, but perhaps it's still a little too early to be counting our chickens. It's also said that whoever sees or touches an ore king will be cursed, which is bad news for the superstitious fishermen. Chillingly, oarfish were seen off the coast of Japan shortly before the Fukushima disaster of 2011. In the Jordanian desert, during what began as just another search for ancient artifacts, archaeologists made a discovery that left the world breathless. While digging through an old underground structure near the city of Petra, scientists uncovered a hidden chamber carved directly into the rock. Inside, 4 glass capsules with a bluish glow held mysterious bodies. The figures, humanoid in shape, were perfectly preserved, with grayish skin, large eyes, and long, thin limbs. Each one lay as if in a deep sleep, surrounded by a thick blue liquid. Around the room, unknown inscriptions covered the walls. No known language could fully translate the symbols, but some researchers believe the figures might have been placed there thousands of years ago, possibly even before the earliest known civilizations in the region. The archaeologists immediately secured the area, and an international team of scientists was called in. Locals, upon hearing the news, began referring to the beings as sky protectors, believing they were sent from another world to guard an ancient secret long forgotten by humanity. The most astonishing detail was that when examining the tissue of these bodies, scientists detected a faint electric charge, suggesting the beings were in a state of hibernation, ready to awaken. No one knows what they are, where they came from, or why they were buried there. But one thing is certain: the Guardians have changed everything we thought we knew about our past, and maybe even about our future. And you? Do you believe these beings are visitors from another world? Do you think we're about to uncover something much bigger than we imagined? Tell us in the comments. Let's talk about it. Here's a sad and striking discovery from Yukon in Canada. It's a frozen baby mammoth, and it was found in June 2022. Scientists are very excited by the discovery because the juvenile woolly mammoth is whole. It's the first whole mammoth discovery of its kind in North American history. Experts believe that the animal, which was found by gold miners in the Klondike region of Yukon, is around 30,000 years old. It's been mummified through natural processes. Only one comparable discovery has ever happened in the past anywhere else in the world, and that was in the Siberian permafrost in 2007. Scientists say that the baby is female and have given it the name Nunchoga. It means big baby animal in the Han language of the First Nations people of the area. We owe this discovery to the vigilance of one of the miners who called out to his boss after he hit something with his bulldozer and immediately realized he needed to turn the vehicle off and take a closer look. If he hadn't, Nunchoga would likely have been destroyed and lost forever. During the 1960s, a Turkish man got the shock of his life while he was carrying out some home renovations. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found himself stepping through the hole into a vast forgotten underground city. Entirely by accident, he'd rediscovered the lost city of Derinkuyu. The city, which is wholly carved out of volcanic rock, is enormous. There are 18 different layers of caves and buildings descending to a depth of 250 feet below the surface. Mystery surrounds its origins, but it's thought that it may have been founded by the Phrygians almost 3,000 years ago. How anybody was able to undertake such a sophisticated underground construction project back then is completely unknown. The city has been abandoned and then rediscovered many times over the centuries, having once provided shelter for early Christians fleeing persecution from Roman soldiers. Stone shafts that run from the lowest levels to the surface provide light and oxygen, while enormous rolling stone doors mean that nobody could get in unless the people inside allowed it to happen. Of all the things that have ever gone missing, the fabled missing link might be the most famous. The missing link is the theoretical evolutionary connection between apes and humankind, which would prove beyond all doubt that we really did all come from apes. Now, scientists in the Philippines believe they may have found it. Researchers working within Calao Cave on the island of Luzon have found a set of 13 fossilized bones and teeth that belong to a previously uncategorized subhuman species. They've been named Homo usonensis, and despite being a little smaller than us, they appear to have shared several modern traits. The remains date back between 50,000 and 67,000 years, and so these proto-people would have lived at the same time as Homo sapiens. They were found close to butchered animal bones, which implied that this new species carved and ate meat and also knew how to use primitive tools. A debate has now begun about whether or not this species was replaced by Homo sapiens after coming into contact with them, or whether these early hunter-gatherers were a unique and different evolutionary strand. In May 2022, a man out walking on a beach in Ireland found a strange creature washed up. He took pictures of it and then turned to the internet for help identifying it. Despite keeping his name and the precise location of the beach a secret, the story made the national news in Ireland. Members of the public struggled to identify the creature, but so did scientists. Before anyone had a better idea, it had been nicknamed the Forbidden Churro. While it might look like something from a science fiction movie, the most likely explanation is that it's a greater pipefish. That's the most common theory of marine life experts who've studied the pictures, although it's also been speculated that it might be the tail of a sea scorpion, part of a stingray, or maybe even a badly dehydrated needlefish. Despite their name, needlefish tend to be thicker than the creature we see here. Pipefish belong to a subfamily of smaller fish connected to the sea dragon and seahorse families, and tend to be small, but it's not unheard of for them to grow up to 18 inches long. This one appears to be even longer than that. In 2017, Eric Rintamaki, a geologist and resident of Michigan, USA, discovered a new kind of rock called euperlite. The strange stones are mostly made up of syenite rock, a substance similar to granite, but they look nothing like granite because of the bright orange glow that seems to emit from them. The glow is down to a fluorescent substance called sodalite. It looks orange to the naked eye, but when exposed to ultraviolet light, it turns yellow. The sodalite can form almost any pattern in the stones, from spots to stripes and galaxy-like whorls and spirals. No two stones are alike. The only place in the world they are known to occur is Michigan's Lake Superior coast in the Upper Peninsula, where you'll find them scattered across the eastern beaches between Grand Marais and Sault Ste. Marie. As for how they came to be in this location and why they are not found anywhere else, nobody really knows. It's been speculated that they came south from the Coldwell Alkaline Complex in Ontario via continental glaciation before finding their way into Lake Superior. But if that were the case, we'd expect at least some of them to still be in Ontario. So much has happened since November 2020 that it already feels like a very long time ago. For that reason, you might have forgotten about the metal monolith that turned up in the red desert of Utah and captured the attention of the whole world. While it initially seemed like the monolith had appeared overnight, a subsequent examination of Google Maps proved that it had been standing since at least October 2016. As soon as it was noticed, it disappeared again before eventually ending up in the hands of the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. The mystery surrounding the Utah monolith prompted literally hundreds of copycats, with several other U.S. states and many European and South American nations eventually getting monoliths of their own. None of the copycats attracted as much attention as the original. The origins and initial purpose of the monolith remain unknown. All we know for sure is that it was smooth, well-made, 12 feet tall, and made of a material that kept its shine despite 4 years in the desert. There have been suggestions that it might have been erected by John McCracken, a minimalist conceptual artist who once lived in the area, but the deceased artist's family think it's unlikely. Asteroids come in all shapes and sizes, but astronomers had never seen one that looks like the celestial body that's now known as Cleopatra prior to September 2021. The unusually shaped 160-mile-long asteroid has been compared to a gigantic dog bone and is currently part of an asteroid belt orbiting the Sun between Mars and Jupiter. Cleopatra might not be enormous by the standards of some asteroids, but it's large enough to have 2 tiny moons in orbit around it. According to Frank Marchish, an astronomer at the SETI Institute in Mountain View, USA, there isn't another object in our solar system like it. Astronomers first noted an unusual-looking object in the asteroid belt around 20 years ago, but it wasn't possible to gain detailed images of Cleopatra until far more recently. We also now know that it has a porous structure and a metallic composition, which means it was most likely formed when material reaccumulated after a colossal impact, perhaps even another asteroid hitting another celestial body. Its moons might even have been created by material that's escaped from the surface of the asteroid as it rotates at a near-critical speed. In the summer of 2019, a farmer named Tom Giddens felt his plow strike something solid when he was working in his field in Sampson County, North Carolina. When he got out to investigate, he found this battered, heavily eroded stone face. He immediately knew he was out of his depth, but understood that he might have discovered something historically important. That prompted him to get on the phone and call in the experts, but unfortunately, the experts he spoke to didn't know much more than he did, and they still don't. The carving is large, almost 2 feet across from ear to ear, and closer to 3 feet from the top of the head to the chin. It's the fact that it's made from sandstone that makes it so hard to date. The substance erodes very quickly because it's soft, and so this could be as comparatively recent as a century old, or it could be more than 1,000. Archaeologists might be able to offer a better guess if the design was familiar, but it isn't. Nothing like this has ever come out of the ground in North Carolina before, nor anywhere near it. It might even be the work of an ancient fraudster. Returning to the topic of amazing discoveries in outer space, astrophysicists announced in July 2022 that they think they've finally pinpointed the source of high-energy cosmic neutrinos. They were previously considered to be one of the universe's great mysteries, but it's now thought that they come from a series of linked galaxies containing blazing hot nuclei known as blazars. The objects, scientifically known as pivotron blazars, are extragalactic neutrino sources and function as cosmic ray accelerators. Neutrinos have a mass of almost 0, are electronically neutral, and interact with almost nothing else in the universe. That's why they're nicknamed ghost particles. Despite being almost impossible to observe, they're among the most abundant particles in the known universe. Normal neutrinos are produced by radioactive decay, for example, the byproducts of nuclear reactions that happen inside the sun. High-energy cosmic neutrinos are 1,000,000 times more energetic than any neutrinos produced by our sun, or even the neutrinos produced by any known supernova. They interact with so little that by using modern technology, we've been able to trace them back to their source because they travel in an almost perfectly straight line. In the case of the neutrinos that were studied in July 2022, those straight lines took us back to the nucleus of a huge galaxy with an active supermassive black hole at its center. Subscribe now and turn on the bell so you don't miss a thing. Fascinating discoveries await you in every video. Thanks for your support. See you soon.